In this video, we're going to look at testing in Ruby on Rails, and this is an overview in testing, and there's later videos that get a little bit more in depth on testing. Testing is built into Ruby on Rails. It's really at the heart of many activities that you can do, and you should really practice a strong testing ethos when you're developing Ruby on Rails applications. It'll make your application debugging a lot easier task if you've been testing your functions and your controllers and methods and your models all along. It's going to be a much easier task to make sure your applications are running and stay on top of things. So an overview here of what are files in our test directory, that some of which we get generated for us, others that we have to create or populate. I'm going to kind of go a little bit backwards. Down on the bottom here are unit tests, and these correspond to our specific models in the database. So we have an actor, which corresponds to our actor table. We have comment, critic, and movie, and these were generated when we generated the model with that script generate command. And inside of here, when these Ruby files, and these are Ruby files, so they're Ruby code. You can see the .rb. The first thing that happens when this class is instantiated, it's going to look for a fixture. And I'll get to what a fixture is, but I'm pointing this out right now, so keep that in mind for a second. It's going to load that fixture. The next thing that happens is that it'll run a series of tests, whatever tests you design. And your goal with testing is to make sure that your database and your table structure is behaving the way that you want it to behave when you load data into it, when you search data in it, that it's returning what you're looking for, when you delete, that things are properly deleted. And you do it through these different tests that you can run here. Now here, this test method here is not a very good example, obviously, because it's just going to come back and say true. And what the assert true does is just exactly that. It asserts true. Now in our later videos, we'll actually get in and look at how you can test some stuff here for real instead of just this asserting something that is true. But your goal is to have all your asserts pass with truths. If it fails, then you know something that you did, hopefully relatively recently after you run your test, broke your application in some way with regards to the database when you're doing unit tests. So remember, all of these unit tests are specific to your model interaction with your models interacting with your database. Now, I mentioned that fixtures thing right up here, and when we generated these files, we also had some fixture files generated. What these fixture files do is they populate your test database, and if we look, let me pull up my program here for our database. You'll see there's two databases, and one of them is Movie Critic, and one is Movie Critic _test. So we have a database that we're going to strictly test on. Now, if I go look at my configuration in my database.yml file here, if I scroll down here, you'll see right down here we have test. And this is my setup for this. So test is set up to talk to the Movie Critic _test database. So when I go to do testing, that's what it's going to be looking for. So what the fixture does is when this model is instantiated for the actor, it looks at this YML file and then using the data in here pre-populates your database. So you can put specific information into your database, good or bad, and be able to test on it and know what you should return back out of that database when you do a find or when you call for a specific model based on an ID. So that's what fixtures are, and they're pretty straightforward little files. Now another test, a different kind of test, is the functional tests that test our controllers. And what you're looking for here is specific responses coming back from your controller. So for example here, we had a couple of these tests generated because we used the generate script to generate our controllers. And if we look at, we have a test index, so we go and say get our index, our symbol index, and we assert the response as success. So that it should come back and say, yes, this was successful. And the template coming back should be list, because that's what we've set up our application to test. Now, obviously, if you changed your index to point to something else, this test is going to fail. So you have to remember, if you adjust that, to adjust your test, but it allows you to always stay in that mode of testing as you make changes to make sure you don't break your application inadvertently. And as you can see, you can test a number of things here. There's lots of good resources about testing on the internet with Ruby on Rails, and some of them, there's resources just about testing in general as you develop. It's a good habit to get into to test. It'll save you a lot of heartache and pain down the road when it comes to debugging and making sure your application works in a variety of circumstances and configurations.